One of the other James Bond films that I was asked to help with was a film called Octopussy. There was quite a discussion whether they would be allowed to use that name, both in America and in England, but they decided that's what Ian Fleming had written, and that's what they would use. When I arrived, my first job was to try and teach somebody pickpocketing moves. And in this particular case, there was an actress, a new actress called Christina Wayborn from Denmark, who apparently in the film belonged to a circus. And when they had a parade through the streets, she had to go up to somebody and just talk to them and then walk away with their braces. Funny idea, but that was part of my act, and so they asked me to show what the moves were. Of course, in a film, you could do a film cut, but they always want to have the genuine moves. So once I had taught her that, then they said you also need to pickpocket some of the audience in the circus tent. So again, I had to show some moves. And then I heard, during a script meeting, that the major part of the storyline was a Faberge egg.
He turned up dead in East Germany.
Well, of course, Faberge eggs are very valuable. They were made by a Russian jeweler called Karl Faberge in the 1890s for the royals and the monarchs of Russia. Often it would be a box or the shape of an egg that would open up, and inside would be a surprise. In this particular case, that we're using a Faberge egg, beautiful and always selling for hundreds of thousands of pounds. Well, it just so happened that I was friendly with a man called Kenneth Snowman, who was the authority on the Faberge eggs. His father had quite a collection of them, and when I first started in show business, I was a guest in their home quite a few times. And just very casually on the sideboard, this man had, I think it was up to 9 of these Faberge eggs, unheard of for a private collection. The Snowmans managed a shop just off Bond Street called Wartsky's, which specializes in Faberge jewelry. And Kenneth Snowman had written 2 or 3 books on the Faberge collections. So I introduced him, because they had to get a fake egg made. In fact, we had quite a few made for rehearsals. They were quite plain, but for the actual film, we had 2 identical ones made. One was supposed to be the genuine article, and one was a fake. And the story goes that the Russians had some of these eggs which they wanted to sell to raise some money to pay off some big debts. And it goes to auction, to the Sotheby auction house in Bond Street. Well, Roger Moore goes along with the minister to see who's going to bid for the egg, and a well-known actor, Louis Jourdan, a French film star that was very well-known, plays the baddie, and he's bidding for the egg. And all of a sudden, the minister sees that Roger Moore is bidding for the egg, and of course he didn't know he was going to do that, so it goes up into hundreds of thousands. It's 450,000, and James Bond, or Roger Moore, bids 475,000, and the minister is really shocked.
I have 475.
He wasn't expecting him to do that, and luckily the Louis Jourdan character bids 500,000.
500,000 pounds. 500,000 pounds. I have £500,000. All done? Any more? Yours, sir. 500,000 pounds. The next lot is number?
He could have been stuck with it.
I doubt it. He had to buy it.
But why?
And it's knocked down for that £500,000. And when they get back to the office...
You had no business bidding for that egg. And what would you have done if you'd got it?
I would have claimed it was a fake, sir, and not paid.
So what he had done, he secretly switched the real Faberge egg for a fake one.
Here's the original. I switched it with the fake during the auction.
Normally in a film, you just do a cut and you bring out the other one, or could even be the same one, because how could you tell the difference? But since we have VHSs and DVDs that people can play back, they want to know at which point did he actually switch it. So before people had home recordings, they wouldn't have thought of that. But now people run things back to see at which moment it could have happened. So he had to make a movement to actually switch the egg. And they asked me to come up with some different systems. I'm just explaining to John Glenn how I want Roger Moore to switch the two eggs. So John says to me, I think you better sit down and show him. You can see Roger's just about to get up, and I sit down. I beckon over the attendant, who was holding a velvet cushion with the egg on top. I hold the catalogue, I look at the photograph, I pick up the egg, I compare the egg with the photograph, and it seems to match. I make sure that it looks real, and I said, thank you, and I put it back in the cushion. I'm sitting there, and suddenly, remember this is a rehearsal shot, suddenly Cubby Broccoli says, well, waiting for me to switch it. And I said, I've done it. What I had done is I had the fake one on my lap. I picked up the real one, compared it to the one in the catalogue, and under cover of the catalogue, just very casually dropped it, picked up the other one, and all the attention was on the catalogue. So when I said thank you and I put it back in the cushion, I changed it. Nobody around me noticed it, and that's when Broccoli said, well, and I was very proud and pleased to say, I've done it. As I wanted to switch the egg behind something, I asked for a catalogue. At that moment, they hadn't thought of printing a catalogue. We didn't actually print one. We used an actual catalogue from one of the auctions, and we pasted in a photograph of the egg, but it looked very genuine. So if I hadn't thought of the catalogue, I don't think there would have been one in the film. They were very impressed with that, and I then had to show Roger to make the same sort of move in the film so that it would look like that he'd switched the egg.
Against you, sir. No more than 450.
Jim?
The bid is £450,000.
Of course, if James Bond was the only person to ask to examine the egg, it would have looked very suspicious. So they wrote something into the film that wouldn't have been there if I hadn't had that idea. And that was another one of the bidders asked to examine the egg and puts it back in a similar way.
Are you bidding, sir?
Quite often when I've been asked to work on a film, it's only for one or two things, and then as soon as I get on the set, I get ideas, and sometimes you come up with ideas and they're forgotten, they're not used, and other times, surprisingly, they are used, and whenever I see one of my ideas actually go into the film, I'm thrilled to bits, because that's quite an accolade, because they obviously have script writers, and they have editors, and they have directors and producers all have their own ideas, and it's not easy to get an idea through. But one idea, which is really ridiculous, but I was very proud of because it actually went into the film. The opening sequence for Octopussy is probably one of the longest sequences ever shot before the titles come up. Let me explain what happens. We see a race course, and there's a 4x4 vehicle towing a horse box. And of course, sticking out the back of the horse box is the back of a horse. James Bond is in that vehicle. They go onto the racetrack, and then various things happen.
Gracias, querido.
So the next thing is we see him in this horse-drawn box, and as they're driving away, this beautiful girl is driving him. This connects the tow bar. The girl drives off, and the horse box is still running along the road, when suddenly the door opens. We see the back of the horse, which suddenly comes up, and we see that it's a mechanical horse, just a fake horse. A small aeroplane with its wings folded upwards starts rolling out. He's sitting in the pilot seat. The wings open up, and he flies off. As James Bond is flying the plane, doing all kinds of aerobatics to try and get away, he flies towards the airfield, and he sees the hangar where the doors are just about closing. He turns the plane sideways so he can just get through the opening and out the other side. And a heat-seeking missile has been fired at him, which of course follows him into the hangar and then blows out the whole thing. Well, that hangar was created by John Richardson. It was made of little plastic pieces like that, but looked fantastic and enormous. And when it blew up, all those little hundreds of pieces just flew into there. It looked really genuine. It was fantastic. And all that is before the titles start rolling. It's a mini film in itself. Late in the film, I came out with a couple of other ideas. Quite a few are not used, and some were used. For instance, towards the end of the film, there's a circus scene.
Where can I find the base commander? It's urgent.
Let's see your circus pass.
Damn it, man, I said it's urgent.
The circus is in Berlin, in East Germany, and they of course needed to book some circus acts. Some that I knew personally, and one that I was very friendly with from my variety days, called Elizabeth and Collins. Now, I couldn't get hold of them because I think they'd retired by that time, but I described the act, and they liked that a lot. Elizabeth used to go on a big circular disc which would spin, and he would stand on what they call a slack wire. That's a curved wire which wobbled. He would stand on that on one leg while she's spinning on this big wheel, and he would start throwing knives all round her, landing just absolutely near her face, her body, until it was surrounded with knives. It's a very thrilling act, and they were wonderful people. They liked the idea of that. Of course, we didn't get hold of that act, so they used two actors. They used twin actors called Anthony and David Myers. One was put on a wheel to spin around, and the other one not on the slack bar, just on a platform, but blindfold. And again, I think they got the idea from me, because I've done a lot of blindfold acts. So he's blindfolded and then throwing knives at the spinning board that's holding his brother. I showed them how to hold the knives, how to throw them. I've used trick knives before and trick boards to incorporate that. But then there was an idea at the end that was definitely from one of my acts, where he takes a knife out of the board, calls out to his blindfolded brother, and throws the knife, and although blindfolded, he catches the knife. And I showed him how to do that.